Beneath the smoke and rubble of the last Great War lie truths too jagged for history books to hold. Files burned before they could be read, names erased before they could be spoken. Somewhere in the silence between official records, a shadow, war still flickers, its trails hidden in locked vaults, in scorched earth, in seas that will not give back what they've taken. On the night of 17th of February 1945, as artillery shells fell on Königsberg, a heavily guarded military train departed from a siding near the industrial yards of the Samland Peninsula. Witnesses, few of whom would live long enough to speak, later described the train as consisting of 8 covered freight cars, each sealed with welded steel doors and marked only with a crimson sunburst emblem, an insignia not found in any official Wehrmacht or SS catalogue. The manifest listed its cargo as Projekt Morgenrot, High Security Transit, accompanied by Reich Main Security Office authorization codes bearing Heinrich Himmler's personal cipher. Its escort unit, identified through fragmentary Soviet field intelligence, was the 12th SS Technical Protection Battalion, a formation created late in the war to guard experimental materials. The train's departure point, though only a few kilometers from the front line, was chosen for its proximity to a little-used junction leading south toward Marienburg and beyond into occupied Poland. No official German record mentions the train after this night. Soviet intercepts indicate the Red Army's 43rd Army had advanced into the region by 21 February. Yet their war diaries, now in the Russian State Military Archive, make no mention of a capture. Instead, a cryptic after-action note from Colonel Pavel Kornev, commander of the 178th Rifle Division, states only, "Rail corridor secure, unusual freight not located, proceeding with primary objective." This omission would fuel decades of speculation. The first hint of the train's fate emerged in 1963 when a Polish forestry worker in Warmian-Masurian Voivodeship discovered a corroded steel plate bearing the same sunburst insignia. It was lodged in a riverbank along the Paswanka River, far from any wartime rail line. Local authorities confiscated the find within days, and the incident was reported internally to the Ministry of Internal Affairs under the heading Unverified Relic, possible German origin. No further public acknowledgement was made. By 1978, NATO analysts were quietly revisiting the case after the partial release of a Soviet military report, codenamed Vyatka 12. The report referenced an energy-generating apparatus of non-terrestrial schema allegedly evacuated by the Germans from Königsberg in the war's final weeks. The terminology, particularly non-terrestrial schema, has since been contested by historians, with some suggesting it was a mistranslation from German scientific jargon, perhaps referring to high-voltage particle acceleration equipment. Others note that the phrasing was unusual even for Soviet technical descriptions. In 1989, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, a cache of East German Ministry for State Security, Stasi, records was recovered in Magdeburg. Among them was an undated transcript of an interrogation with a former SS logistics officer, Karl-Heinz Rademacher. Rademacher claimed that Projekt Morgenrot involved the transport of a prototype reactive power unit, developed under the direction of the SS Development Corps in conjunction with industrial scientists from AEG and Siemens Schuckert. He alleged that the device was intended for installation at a fortified underground site near Breslau, an area overrun by the Red Army before it could be deployed. When pressed for details, Rademacher abruptly halted the interview, citing the strictest oath he had taken in 1944. 3 days later, he was found dead in his holding cell, reportedly from a cerebral hemorrhage. Attempts to trace the train's possible routes south from Königsberg have been hampered by the obliteration of rail records during both the Soviet offensive and post-war reconstruction. However, aerial reconnaissance imagery from March 1945, declassified by the US National Archives in 2002, shows an unusual concentration of bomb craters along a short stretch of track near the town of Korschen, modern-day Korscha. Intriguingly, the damage appears to have been inflicted not by Allied bombing, but by controlled demolition from within, suggesting a deliberate attempt to block pursuit. Local folklore in the region still tells of the train that burned without fire, describing a night in which strange lights were seen near the rail embankment, followed by a sudden ground tremor. No Allied or Soviet unit reported an engagement in the area on that date. Soil analysis, conducted by a Polish geological team in 1991, found anomalous levels of rare earth metals, yttrium and neodymium, beneath the overgrown railbed. Substances consistent with advanced electrical equipment, but rare in 1940s industrial applications. In the early 2000s, an independent research group from Gdansk University, working under the guise of environmental survey, attempted a ground-penetrating radar scan of suspected burial sites along the former rail line. The operation was abruptly halted after uniformed officers from an unspecified Polish government agency arrived, citing security jurisdiction. The research team's equipment was confiscated and no public explanation was given. To this day, Projekt Morgenrot remains absent from official German wartime records. Surviving members of the 12th SS Technical Protection Battalion have either refused to speak or claim no knowledge of the mission. The sunburst insignia, once thought to be unique to the train, has been found on only 2 other artifacts: a fragment of reinforced cabling retrieved from a collapsed tunnel near Waldenburg, and a steel storage case recovered from a flooded mine shaft. In Lower Silesia, both locations tied to late-war SS research projects. Whether the train was destroyed, captured, or hidden deep underground, its disappearance has left a void in the historical record, one that neither the passage of time nor the collapse of the Eastern Bloc has managed to fill. The only certainty is that somewhere, beneath the layers of post-war denial and archival silence, the truth of Projekt Morgenrot remains buried, along with whatever it carried out of a dying Reich into the shadows of history. In the spring of 1952, a classified file marked Deep Shelf was logged into the British War Office's secure records vault in Whitehall. Its chain of custody is known only through a faded receipt slip. One entry on 14th of April, one removal on 19th April. Between those dates, the file vanished. No recovery has ever been reported. The sole surviving description of its contents comes from a handwritten note in the personal papers of Major Peter L. Rowntree, Royal Engineers, retired, who had briefly handled the file before its disappearance. He described aerial photographs, Baltic coast, 1944, structures inconsistent with any Soviet or German naval registry. The photographs, according to Rowntree, depicted a narrow inlet on an unnamed island. A pair of enormous camouflaged gantries spanned the shoreline, connected to what appeared to be a recessed dry dock cut into the bedrock. The dock was empty. No hulls, no cranes in use, but the scale was abnormal for the era, easily capable of accommodating vessels larger than any recorded Kriegsmarine surface ship. The camouflage netting was draped not only over the shore facilities, but over sections of the water itself, suggesting an attempt to conceal from aerial reconnaissance something submerged or semi-submerged. The original reconnaissance run had been flown by a de Havilland Mosquito PR.X from RAF Benson in late August 1944. The aircraft's mission was to photograph suspected U-boat staging areas in the eastern Baltic. None of the official sortie logs from Benson list the inlet, and no negatives have surfaced. The existence of the images is corroborated only by a single partially burned contact print found in 1971 in the estate of Flight Lieutenant Henry Coombs, the Mosquito's navigator. The fragment shows a sliver of shoreline and the corner of one gantry, along with a blurred object at the dock's far end. In 1983, a declassified US Navy Office of Naval Intelligence memorandum surfaced briefly in academic circles before being withdrawn. It referred to unspecified joint naval industrial activity between German and Imperial Japanese representatives, Eastern Baltic, August 1944, and cited construction of unknown maritime platform. The memorandum cross-referenced a Soviet Northern Fleet patrol log from the same month, which recorded an engagement with enemy surface structures in the Gulf of Finland. Though the log gives no details beyond the phrase, "contact broken." After 22 minutes, no result. Post-war Soviet charts of the Baltic, show the inlet's location as open water, with depth markings inconsistent with pre-war surveys. In 1991, following the collapse of the USSR, a Finnish maritime historian, Dr. Lauri Saarinen, secured permission to visit the region. His ship was turned back by Russian naval patrols, 20 nautical miles from the coordinates he believed matched. The photographs. Saarinen's notes record that the patrol commander told him, in perfect German, "This area has been closed since before the war ended. You will not approach." Satellite imagery from the early 2000s, publicly available but low resolution, shows an indistinct discoloration in the water at the suspected location. Attempts by civilian researchers to obtain higher resolution images through European Space Agency archives have been met with refusal, citing defense sensitivity. One image leaked anonymously to a Swedish investigative journalist in 2014 shows what appears to be the rectangular outline of a structure beneath the water, roughly 200 meters in length, with angular projections at either end. The image's authenticity remains disputed, as its metadata has been scrubbed. Among naval historians, theories diverge. Some propose the site was an experimental dry dock for Type WWII U-boats, designed for rapid resupply far from conventional bases. Others suggest it was intended for something far larger, a prototype surface vessel or submersible aircraft carrier, a concept known to have been explored by both the Kriegsmarine and the Imperial Japanese Navy in 1943-44. A handful of researchers believe it may have been connected to rumoured Projekt Seeschlanger, a German plan to deploy massive floating platforms armed with V2 derivatives. The lack of wreckage or debris is perhaps the most perplexing detail. Baltic wartime shipyards at Gotenhafen, Königsberg, and Pillau left abundant physical traces, but at the inlet site, no known dive expedition has recovered even a fragment of wartime equipment. This absence leads some to suspect post-war removal, possibly by Soviet engineering brigades, or the deliberate scuttling and burial of the entire facility under controlled demolition. In 2019, a retired Polish hydrographer anonymously provided a fragment of sonar data to a Warsaw-based historical institute. The scan, allegedly taken in 1987 during a classified seabed survey, shows a symmetrical trench cut into the bedrock of the suspected inlet location. The trench appears to have been filled with sediment, but its straight edges and uniform width strongly indicate human construction. The hydrographer claimed the original full survey was seized by the Soviet Baltic Fleet and remains in sealed archives in Kaliningrad. No British official record acknowledges Deep Shelf or its disappearance. When approached by journalists in 2007, the Ministry of Defence stated that no file of that designation had ever existed. Rowntree's personal note and the burned photograph fragment remain the only surviving pieces of evidence, their provenance, confirmed only by handwriting analysis and chemical dating of the photographic paper. For all practical purposes, the silent shipyards of the Baltic Inlet exist only in the shadows of missing files, guarded waters, and the faded recollections of men who saw too much through a camera lens in the summer of 1944 and were never meant to speak of it again. On 3rd February 1945, as American forces advanced through the outskirts of Manila, an encrypted OSS dispatch left the temporary headquarters in Leyte for Washington. It was addressed to the Far East Division of Naval Intelligence and carried the urgent classification, Eyes Only, Priority 1. The message, later discovered in partial form within a misfiled batch of War Department communications, read, Intercept U-234B before departure from Mindoro Strait. Cargo priority, Zeta Scientific. Do not transfer to Navy custody until cleared by OSS Command. The remainder of the cable was missing. The designation U-234B did not match any known Kriegsmarine registry, yet both the US Navy and OSS kept independent tracking logs of a foreign submarine operating out of Penang, Malaya, in late 1944. According to fragmentary Allied records, the vessel departed Penang in mid-January, carrying an unidentified cargo and a mixed crew of German and Japanese personnel. Intelligence briefings from the period note that Penang had served as a base for Axis naval operations in the Indian Ocean. And by early 1945, it was the last functional port for German U-boats in Southeast Asia. OSS officer Henry Mallory, attached to Detachment 404 in Manila, was tasked with leading the interception. His service file describes him as fluent in German and Japanese, with previous postings in the Mediterranean theater. Mallory's field journal, recovered decades later from his niece's estate, describes a tense briefing on 8th February aboard a converted PT boat at Subic Bay. Present were 2 US Navy officers, an OSS cryptographer, and a civilian scientist identified only as Dr. R. The scientist spoke little during the meeting, but Mallory noted his unusual familiarity with naval propulsion systems. On 10th February, Mallory's team made visual contact with the submarine just north of Mindoro, surfacing under a false flag. The boarding, according to his notes, was completed without resistance. He records entering the forward hold and finding sealed metal containers, no external markings, surfaces cold to the touch despite ambient heat. The crew, numbering 17, were confined under guard, and the submarine was towed toward a temporary anchorage in Batangas Bay. It was at this point the trail goes abruptly cold. No mention of the submarine appears in US Navy war diaries. For the period, the OSS Manila detachment log for 10 to 14 February 1945 has been replaced with a single page stating, "Records temporarily removed, HQ review." Mallory's own personnel file ends abruptly with the notation, "Transferred, location withheld." He never reappears in post-war employment roles, veteran registries, or public records. In 1947, his parents received a letter from the War Department stating only that their son was missing, presumed dead, in the service of his country. In 1979, a civilian diving team surveying a trench off Mindoro for a telecommunications project recovered 3 corroded steel plates bearing partially legible German manufacturing stamps. One stamp, Werft Kiel AG 1944, was consistent with U-boat production, but did not match known hull numbers. The plates were handed to the Philippine Coast Guard, which subsequently declared the site a hazard to navigation and banned further diving. An Australian Navy hydrographic survey in 1982 recorded a sonar contact in the same trench, roughly 90 meters in length, with an irregular superstructure inconsistent with standard Type 9 or Type 15 U-boats. The data was never officially published, but a partial chart leaked in 1995 shows a pencil notation reading, "Possible U-boat, advise clearance." No recovery mission followed. The mysterious Zeta Scientific designation from the original OSS cable has attracted considerable speculation. Declassified German documents captured at the end of the war mention a Zeta Apparat, a high-output electrical converter under development by Siemens Schuckert for naval use. Some historians believe this may have been intended for a long-range, high-speed submarine prototype. Others suggest it was related to a covert exchange of uranium oxide from Germany to Japan, a theory supported by the confirmed cargo of the real U-234 captured in the Atlantic in May 1945. Efforts to obtain confirmation from surviving OSS personnel have failed. Interviews conducted in the early 2000s with 2 retired Navy officers who served in the Philippines in 1945 yielded only evasive responses. One admitted that there was a boat we weren't supposed to talk about, while the other refused to answer questions entirely. In 2011, an amateur sonar scan conducted by a Philippine research group detected what they described as an object resembling a submarine at a depth of 320 meters in the Mindoro Trench. The group's permit to conduct follow-up dives was revoked 2 weeks later by the Department of National Defense, citing coordination with foreign authorities. Today, the official stance of both the US Navy and the Philippine government is that no such submarine exists in the area. The incident is absent from OSS and Naval Intelligence wartime summaries, and Mallory's name appears nowhere in official honors lists or casualty rolls. What remains are fragments, a half-redacted cable, a handful of journal entries, and a sonar trace on a chart never meant to leave a locked cabinet. In the absence of acknowledgement, the disappearance of U-234B endures as an unsolved anomaly. In the closing months of the Pacific War, one in which the most vital cargo may never have been the submarine itself, but whatever it carried into the deep. On 12th of May 1946, in a dimly lit chamber of a Soviet military courthouse in Prague, a tribunal convened to hear the testimony of Dr. Otto Kessler, a German physicist formerly attached to the Reich's Forschungsamt. The proceedings, recorded in shorthand by a military stenographer, concerned Todeszone Gamma, a project Kessler claimed had been tested in the Sudeten Mountains in late 1944. The trial records, officially destroyed in 1950, survived only through a microfilm reel recovered from a private archive in Brno in 1987. According to the transcript, Kessler described an atmospheric interference generator capable of producing high-energy ionization fields over a radius of several kilometers. Its intended effect, he stated, was the disruption of airborne electrical systems, rendering entire squadrons of Allied bombers inoperative without a single shot fired. The device, he claimed, was tested twice, in November and December 1944, near a facility concealed in a disused mine complex outside Vejprty, close to the Czechoslovak-German border. Soviet interrogators pressed Kessler on the operational results. He recounted that during the first test, conducted under heavy cloud cover, 2 Luftwaffe aircraft equipped with standard radio and navigation systems were flown into the zone. Both suffered complete electrical failure, forcing emergency landings. During the second test, the generator was activated during an Allied reconnaissance overflight. The incoming aircraft turned away before entering the zone. Soviet intelligence suspected this was due to intercepted ultra-communications warning of unusual atmospheric anomalies. Kessler's testimony was supported by the presence of several crates of technical documents and equipment fragments seized by the Red Army from the mine site in May 1945. These included copper bus bars of unusual gauge, ceramic insulators marked with AEG serial codes not found in production records, and a partially dismantled generator rotor of unknown design. A Soviet technical officer present at the trial, Major Viktor Korolev, noted in the transcript that material corresponds to neither radar nor conventional transmission apparatus. Construction and tolerances suggest experimental power modulation. The tribunal took a darker turn when Kessler revealed that the project had been under direct oversight of the SS Sonderkommando IBA, a technical unit tasked with developing unconventional weapons for Reich defense. He claimed the order to proceed came from Reich Main Security Office Chief Ernst Kaltenbrunner, bypassing both Luftwaffe and Wehrmacht technical commands. Kessler insisted he had been coerced, citing threats to his family. When asked to identify surviving collaborators, he named 3 engineers, all of whom, according to Soviet intelligence, had vanished from official Allied POW registries after 1945. On 18th of May, just 6 days into the proceedings, the tribunal was abruptly recessed. No explanation appears in the surviving notes. All personnel involved, including judges, interpreters, and technical staff, were reassigned to remote postings in Siberia within 2 weeks. None reappeared in military service roles after 1947. The microfilm reel ends mid-sentence with the words. The weapon's second stage potential would have allowed. Attempts to locate the Vejprty site in the post-war years have been met with unusual obstacles. A 1964 Czechoslovak geological survey of the region omits the relevant coordinates, entirely replacing them with blank grid squares. In 1992, after the fall of the Eastern Bloc, a Czech military historian attempted to reach the mine's entrance, but was intercepted by an unidentified patrol in unmarked uniforms. His notes describe a bare patch of ground, geometrically precise, no vegetation for at least 50 meters in any direction, consistent with localized soil sterilization. Soil samples taken surreptitiously showed elevated concentrations of barium and strontium, both common in high-voltage discharge equipment, but rare in natural deposits. Satellite imagery from 2001 reveals a circular clearing at the suspected site, its perimeter defined by a faint ring of scorched earth. Forestry patterns in the surrounding hills suggest that the area has resisted natural regrowth for decades. Environmental explanations have been put forward, soil contamination, fire damage, but none account for the perfect symmetry of the barren zone. Declassified fragments from the Soviet Ministry of Medium Machine Building, the body responsible for nuclear weapons development, indicate that materials from the Vejprty site were transferred to facilities near Azimuth 16 in 1946. Whether they were integrated into Soviet weapons research remains unknown. A marginal note in one of these files, written in red pencil, reads, "Do not replicate effect in atmosphere until containment procedures resolved." Today, Todeszone Gamma is absent from all official German wartime scientific registries. Its only trace lies in the half-sentences of a vanished trial, in soil where nothing grows, and in the scattered memories of those who once guarded a weapon that, if Kessler's claims were true, could silence the skies without ever firing a shot. The silence around it has lasted almost 80 years and shows no sign of lifting. In the summer of 1961, an East German Stasi defector, known in Western intelligence circles only as Greif, was debriefed over 47 hours in a secure MI6 facility in West Berlin. Among his claims was one that drew immediate attention from both British and American handlers: the existence of a subterranean archive beneath the former Peenemünde Army Research Center, allegedly sealed during the chaotic weeks before Germany's surrender. Greif stated that this archive contained reels of Allied reconnaissance film confiscated by the Reich, documenting aerial overflights of Luftwaffe prototypes not known to the public record. According to Greif, these films, captured from downed RAF and USAF aircraft, were stored alongside technical reports, wind tunnel data, and structural test footage for aircraft that never entered operational service. He claimed some designs were decades ahead of known technology, featuring blended wing bodies, tailless configurations, and propulsion systems without visible propellers or jet exhaust. Greif insisted that after the war, the site was never discovered by Allied occupation forces because it was not directly beneath Peenemünde itself, but connected via a tunnel to an offshore structure under the Baltic seabed. Western intelligence initially dismissed the story as disinformation aimed at inflating the Stasi's perceived knowledge. But in 1984, a NATO survey ship, the NRP Almirante Pereira, conducting seabed mapping exercises in the Baltic, recorded an anomalous structure lying 3.7 kilometers northeast of Peenemunde's shoreline. Sonar images revealed a rectangular form, approximately 60 meters long, with sharp right angles and what appeared to be a collapsed entry shaft. The object was buried under several meters of silt and was not on any maritime construction records. 2 weeks later, a joint NATO dive team attempted to investigate the anomaly. Divers reported intense magnetic interference with their compasses and communication systems upon descending to within 20 meters of the structure. One diver's helmet camera transmitted intermittent footage showing corroded steel bulkheads and what appeared to be embossed markings resembling Reichsadler insignia. Before the team could enter, Surface Command ordered an immediate abort. Officially, this was due to safety concerns regarding structural collapse. But privately, one of the divers later told a colleague that he heard a distinct, mechanical hum underwater despite the structure being sealed. Following the aborted dive, all NATO survey data on the site was reclassified under the codename Blue Harbor. Requests for access to the material by West German defense officials were denied. In 1986, a brief notation in a Bundeswehr internal memo referenced potential ordnance hazard at the coordinates, suggesting unexploded munitions might have been the pretext for restricting civilian exploration. After German reunification, in 1990, researchers combing through Stasi archives found a single document corroborating Greif's claims. A 1960 report from the Ministry for State Security to the East German Navy Command, describing a prohibited maritime exclusion zone off Peenemünde, established under direct Soviet advisement. The report stated that subsurface access points to Peenemünde Annex 4 must remain sealed under penalty of court-martial. Annex 4 does not appear in any official wartime construction blueprints of the facility. Civilian interest in the anomaly reignited in the early 2000s with the rise of independent Baltic diving expeditions. In 2003, a Swedish dive team claimed to have reached the site and retrieved a fragment of reinforced glass with embedded wire mesh. Laboratory analysis confirmed the glass dated to the 1940s and was manufactured by a company contracted to the Luftwaffe for experimental hangar construction. The divers reported seeing what they described as an elevator shaft or vertical conduit, partially collapsed and leading deeper into the silt. Days after publishing their initial findings online, the team withdrew their statements and declined all further interviews. Satellite-based bathymetric mapping in 2015 revealed subtle linear depressions on the seabed, radiating outward from the anomaly site. Maritime engineers speculate these could be remnants of access tunnels or conduits extending from shore. The German Federal Maritime Agency, when questioned, stated that no known infrastructure exists in this location and declined to issue dive permits citing environmental safety. Today, the official record contains no entry for Blue Harbour, no acknowledgement of Annex 4, and no physical evidence of the alleged Peenemünde archive beyond the disputed sonar images and a shard of wartime glass. Greif's fate is equally uncertain. He disappeared from MI6's debriefing program in late 1961, with his file marked exfiltration completed, subject untraceable. Whether the seabed structure is a forgotten wartime installation, a collapsed experimental hangar, or merely a mass of natural rock misinterpreted by sonar, its existence continues to cast a shadow over one of the Second World War's most secretive research sites. For those who have seen the restricted images, the consensus is clear. Something built by human hands still rests in the darkness beneath the Baltic. Some secrets do not fade with time. They harden, like steel buried deep, waiting for the one careless hand to uncover them. Those who touch them rarely live to tell what they've found, and so they remain sealed in darkness, guarded not by walls or guards, but by the fear that comes when you realize the truth was never meant to be known.